Good evening. I'm Augie Napoli, President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Cleveland. I'd like to welcome you to the first session of our 2022 Community Conversations series. We started this series in 2021 with a year of panel discussions focused on the Cleveland's consent decree and its ramifications for our community. We were honored to partner with the Cleveland branch of the NAACP on this series. It was a year of engaging and informative discussions with civic and community leaders throughout, thoughtful questions from the public, and heartfelt stories about families and communities building resilience. This 2021 series reached over 13,000 listeners, and we received over 300 thought-provoking questions from attendees that helped to further the dialogue of each session. There were many issues and concerns raised by the community members during the 2021 series that currently and historically have impacted the greater Cleveland area. Issues such as guaranteeing equitable access to high quality education and health and mental health services, addressing systemic racism in the community, and ensuring community voices and needs are heard through voting and civic engagement. It was clear that we needed to devote more time to these issues, and that is what we are doing now in our 2022 series. We are raising our voices. The objective of these conversations is to provide a forum to raise awareness and increase engagement on important topics in our community. Each of our voices matter and has the power to create change. I'd like to thank Ideastream Public Media for being our lead media partner in this series. I'd also like to thank the City Club of Cleveland for partnering with us in hosting this series of events. WOIO for live streaming tonight's conversation on cleveland19.com, and WOVU for simulcasting again this year, this evening's discussion live on 95.9 FM. And thank you to our community partners for their support throughout this series. Tonight's topic is the impact of COVID-19 on education in Northeast Ohio. It would be an understatement to say that the past 2 school years have been challenging for educators, administrators, students, and parents. We have a panel of education experts here tonight to discuss the challenges, what we have learned, and what still needs to be done. We are privileged to have Jenny Hamel as our moderator. Jenny Hamel is the education reporter for Ideastream Public Media and calls the East Side of Cleveland home. Prior to that, she was a reporter for KCRW, the NPR affiliate in Los Angeles, covering a range of issues from immigration to politics. So without further ado, I am honored to introduce tonight's conversation monitor, Jenny Hamel. Thank you and enjoy the evening. Jenny?
Thank you, Augie, for the introduction. And I'd like to thank the United Way of Greater Cleveland for inviting me to moderate this critical discussion. Thank you, of course, to the City Club of Cleveland for hosting this series of events, WOVU for simulcasting this evening's discussion live on 95.9 FM, and WOIO Channel 19 for live streaming this discussion on cleveland19.com. And of course, to my employer, thank you to Ideastream Public Media for serving as the series lead media partner. So that everyone understands how we're going to interact as a community this evening, we're going to begin with questions that I prepared for this evening's conversation. There is going to be a public question and answer segment at approximately 6:45 when questions from the community will be heard and shared with our panel. So you can start asking your general questions at any time during this conversation and program, and we're going to make every attempt to make sure those questions get answered. You can text your questions. That number is 216-307-5632. Once again, 216-307-5632. And at this time, I would like to introduce our panel of experts. Tonight, we are joined by Jennifer Felker. Jennifer serves as the superintendent for the Educational Service Center of the Western Reserve. Prior to the merger of the Lake and Geauga County Educational Services Centers in January of 2020, Superintendent Felker served as both the Geauga County ESC superintendent and the Lake County ESC superintendent. Superintendent Felker also serves as the executive chair of the Lake Geauga Information Technology Center and superintendent of iSTEM Geauga Early College High School. Eric Gordon. Eric was appointed Chief Executive Officer of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District in June of 2011 after serving as the district's Chief Academic Officer for 4 years. He is responsible for the leadership and daily management of Cleveland's 37,000 student school district. During Mr. Gordon's tenure as CEO, CMSD has seen a 23.9 percentage point increase in graduation rates for African-American students, outpacing state peers by 5.9 points, and a 28.9 increase in graduation rates for Hispanic students, 5.4 points higher than their peers in Ohio. Next, we have Shari Obrenski. Shari is the president of the Cleveland Teachers Union. She served as an American History and Government teacher at Jane Addams Business Career Center in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District for 22 years, prior to becoming president of the Cleveland Teachers Union. We have Andrea Pollock. Andrea is the program manager of the Chagrin Falls Park Community Center and Next Step. Next Step and the Chagrin Falls Community Center are programs of Family and Community Services, Inc. in Geauga County. Ms. Pollock has served as Youth Services Coordinator for Catholic Charities. She was a teacher at Cardinal High School and Middle School from 1989 up to 2005. And finally, we have Dr. Theo Wilson. Dr. Wilson is the Vice President for Children and Families at Step Forward. Dr. Wilson is responsible for managing the operations of Early Head Start, and all service areas and parental involvement programs for 2,700 children. So I'd like to welcome all of you to the conversation. And tonight, Alicia Ellis will present the community questions. Ms. Ellis is the founder and creator of the multimedia platform Mas Lare. She is also the co-founder of the women's empowerment group, Fierce Women on Board. Welcome to everyone, and thank you for taking the time to lend your expertise and perspective to tonight's dialogue. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and start with a question and maybe pose it to all of you. I'm curious because of this topic. I think there is a major perception that last year was the tough year. Last year, when many districts were remote and teachers were learning how to teach in a totally different way, that was truly the pandemic. And now we're kind of out of it and seeing the light through the woods and all of that. So I would just like to know from where you sit, what is your perspective of where education, our students, and the people that work in this field, where are we in this pandemic currently? And is this year that much better than last? I know Eric has a lot to say on this, so I'm going to start with you, Eric.
Oh, Jenny, thank you. I think if you had asked me that question last year, I would have told you that last year was the tough year. As you said, we were learning to teach remotely and learn remotely, connect families in the digital divide, feed families, broadcasting on TV. But I would tell you now, halfway through this year, it pales in comparison to the difficulties that our kids and our families are facing. So many people, many people even watching this broadcast today are still working remotely and still functioning remotely, while kids and teachers had to go back to school 5 days a week, full-time in person, where we know learning has to occur. Wearing masks in our case, maintaining 3 feet social distancing where possible, and trying to help our students finish that unfinished learning from last year, accelerate their learning. So the year started off nice and summery, numbers were low. What we experienced was the explosion of Omicron around us. And so that resulted in large numbers of absences and quarantines, both students and staff. That then disrupts, class coverages and whether you have your teacher consistently. We saw the great resignation nationwide, and so it has been hard to hire staff at all levels of the organization, which puts stress on it. We've experienced real supply chain issues, having trouble getting bottled water where you can't use water fountains, as just one example. And I think we really underestimated the toll, the mental and physical stress toll that kids and adults are experiencing. People are really fragile. And then there is a narrative that we have to really counter that, like you said, last year was the pandemic. Now it's over and we're recovering. We're still in a pandemic. And if December didn't teach us that, nothing will. And we have to help navigate through this pandemic and look toward a recovery plan post-pandemic. And, you know, our kids can recover, they can thrive, but it's not going to be just we're back to neat and, you know, everything's back to normal. We've had now 2 full years of disruption, and it's going to take time for us to recover once the pandemic ends.
Shari, I feel like it's only natural to ask your perspective on that same question. How does this year compare to last year? And are your teachers feeling like they are in the thick of it?
Yes, they are. And Eric covered so much of this very well, but I think that when you mentioned, you know, last year being the tough year and, you know, this year, everything should be back to normal. I think we believed that coming in. We had such optimism coming in. And I think in general, we are an optimistic bunch of people. We always think that the world can just be this wonderful, magical place. And what we quickly found out was that this was tougher than we ever anticipated, and no, the pandemic wasn't over. And I think part of that has fed into the difficulty mentally this year. I mean, we were just expecting it to be so much better, and it's kind of soul crushing that it wasn't. So that's part of it. And then Eric mentioned the issues with the Great Resignation, and it's also the number of substitutes at all levels of the organization where we have substitutes that just don't feel comfortable coming back to work yet. Many of our substitutes have a choice as to whether or not they wish to work. It's a day-to-day situation, and many of them still don't feel comfortable returning in person to school, which means that we often do not have substitutes to cover when staff is out, which then means that staff don't get lunch periods or they don't get planning periods, and they're with their students from the moment that the students walk in the door until the moment they leave. And that is really exhausting. There's a lot of work that needs to be done by teachers and other educators that we can't do when we are actively working with students. And that just means that work has to be done some other time. So it makes for really long, exhausting days, and keeping up that pace as we have throughout the course of the year has been very, very difficult. So people are kind of worn out right now.
Jennifer, from your perspective out in Geauga and Lake counties, what is the juxtaposition of this year versus last year? Is there a difference? Do you feel in some respects that students and staff in your area are out of the woods?
So interesting enough, you know, I help support all the superintendents, school leaders, teachers, educators in 2 counties, approximately 40,000 students that we are educating. And I will tell you, we have this conversation often about, I think, the exhaustion. I think that word was brought up by, you know, many of us in this process the last 2 years. I think the biggest challenge, if I'm going to pick one, as we came back to school for this FY22 school year, in comparison to last school year, was really that we did not have state mandates coming back this year regarding masking, et cetera. And that presented a whole world of different challenges for us. I think our first year returning in last school year was really about PPE, cleaning, protocols for social distancing, all of those things that we wanted to do to protect children. this year it was really left up to local level, meaning local school boards, local superintendents, to make those recommendations and decisions regarding, whether we're going to mask or not. I'm sure everyone can agree. We all have our opinions on those protocols, but that has been one of our biggest challenges, which very controversial discussions as well as board meetings. And not having those state protocols in place. The one thing we do have in place is on busing from the federal level that our children are required all in Ohio across the country as well to wear masks. But I also want to state too, I think when we talk about the social emotional well-being, I worry for our staff, I worry for our district leaders. And I think we really feel that how much more can we all take? And especially going through, as Eric mentioned, December was a tough month. We are suffering with staff, keeping schools open due to the fact of not having substitutes, our current staff being ill long-term, some of them. And I have to bring up the bus driver issue. I mean, we are, struggling to get students to school based on a bus driver shortage. So I do believe that I can say in comparison, it's been a much more difficult year. I think we're looking forward to the future with extended learning and building programming to help support our schools. But I really feel that the state mandate piece and putting at the local level, we all want local decision. And that's what we're put in place for. But that presented a whole different world of challenges this year.
That is something that I've thought about as a journalist. The fact that last year, everyone seemed to be kind of on one side against COVID-19. And the politics that came into play this year between parents and school districts, that has seemed more taxing emotionally and mentally for staff and teachers and superintendents having to deal with, parents who feel like on one side or another of a lot of these policies in place, that the politics of it all was something that wasn't had, you didn't really have to deal with on this level last year. So that's just something totally new that's been introduced. Thea, I want to ask you this year versus last year. I know you're dealing with a lot of young children, and we're talking kids like my son's age, 2.5, got parents still waiting for that vaccine. I mean, at least some of them, for one. And I wonder, has there been any relief in that sector at all? Or do you feel like the pandemic and its kind of far-reaching impacts are still very much felt?
Oh, very much felt, very much in the face kind of a situation where we're looking at children's behaviors just by the anxiety that they are feeling just coming back into to the classroom. And I agree with what everyone is saying. It's almost like a snowball effect. We thought it was going to go away, but it's truly still with us, and especially in the school districts and in the classrooms. We have had we did an ACE study with our parents and our staff, which is the adverse childhood experiences. We wanted to see where they were in all of this and how they felt about this. Now, mind you, an ACE score of 4 says that a child or a person is at risk. We looked at that, what's happening now with our parents, and we have identified at least 5 of the ACE scores that are prevalent with the parents and the children. Increased homelessness, increased child abuse. There's an increase in domestic violence. There's an excessive loss of life. And we did this in the summer. We had over 60% of our staff and our families had already experienced loss of life. So I can only imagine that those percentages have gone up at this point. So when you think about the tragedies that continue to happen and you're trying to measure trauma on children, that's where we are on this. It is, if you look at our young children, and you'll understand this too, Jenny, their routines were just about abolished. young children need routines. And those are the things that were totally missing when, when they were not in a classroom. Inconsistent, we had inconsistent operating hours because we didn't know if we were going to have to close or not. As soon as someone got infected or, exposed, we had to close again. So that was a piece that we didn't anticipate, but there you go. The children have difficulties with transitions because of the routines aren't there. It's just a lot of stress levels, both in adults and children it's just toxic.
And Andrea, I know you're dealing with kind of young adults that are, in some respects very vulnerable, some that have dealt with homelessness, and we're talking about teenagers into their early 20s, and what a hugely important time of one's life. They're thinking about maybe higher education, they're thinking about jobs, their whole outlook, do they start families, do they start dating someone, all of those things. I mean, what sort of impact have you seen when it comes to this year versus last year? Or do you feel very much like they're still wading through it?
Yes, thanks, Jenny. I do feel like they are still wading through it. For that age, the 18 to 24-year-old, they still had decisions to make about vaccines. They had decisions to make about going to a work environment where many people were infected. There were many people who went to work at home if they were professionals, but for our clients who do more menial tasks, they're working in factories or in fast food locations, those options are not available to them. So they continue to work, coming home to a congregate setting. COVID went through our Next Step house. Fortunately, everyone survived, but it's very difficult for an 18 or 19-year-old to be confined for a 10-day period when it was still 10 days. We did everything we could in terms of COVID protocols. But that social isolation, not being able to hang out with friends, not dating as they typically might, it's really taken a toll, I think, not only emotionally, but on their maturity. And all of our clients have a significant trauma history, as was brought up earlier. And there's just no way to soften this kind of a blow. Those who suffer from depression or anxiety, it's been significantly more difficult for them than it would have been. And they don't see a way out. They don't have the hope, I think, that earlier generations had. So they're really struggling with their mental health, and it's sort of across the board with us. So we address that. We constantly address mental health concerns. So I would love to be able to say that we are on our way out of this, but I think, as everyone else has said, December was difficult. Now they're talking about, is this going to come to an end in the spring? We've lost that hopefulness that I think other generations that we may have had when we were young adults. So we're making our way, but it's certainly very difficult.
Thank you. Eric, I know you wanted to add a thought.
Well, Jenny, I just would say that if I were the audience listening, it would sound like there's not much hope. There's a lot of despair or a lot of defeat. You asked us the tough reality, and that's what you heard from us. But I also don't want to miss that our students and our families and our educators are doing incredible things. So I'm sitting in one of my high schools right now. You probably saw a little traffic here. And the reason I'm here is because our 8th grade choice fair is happening, and there are hundreds of kids and parents exploring their high school choices despite the pandemic. When I got here, the students were having their science fair demonstrations of learning. It's 6:30. School was done at 2:30. 4 hours later, they're still presenting the science work that they've been exploring and studying over the course of their semester. And I could name example after example of really incredible learning and teaching things despite everything that is in that. And so I just don't want to miss celebrating our students and our families and their educators who are, taking on this toughness and persevering and doing just amazing work on behalf of kids.
No, absolutely. That's a great point. Shari, with that said, I mean, I have done lots of interviews with you all and stories on the district. There is special care, though, that needs to be given to the teaching staff and staff members at any school district or working for any organization dealing with kids and education. There has to be a recognition that you are flying the plane as you build it. That's been, but it still goes on. So, I mean, what would you like to express to our audience and listeners about the reality of we're doing everything we can to do the best job that we can, but here's what we need from you. I mean, what would you tell our listeners?
Well, first, I would echo what Eric was talking about with some of the amazing things that we're seeing happening in our schools. So one of the things that I would say is to talk to your children, to, whether they're your children or your neighbor children or any school age children that and talk to them about what they're doing at school and what things are happening and what are the great things that are happening, and emphasize some of those good things. I would also say that, bear with teachers, bear with students, bear with other school personnel, that grace is much appreciated. We're learning so many new things still every day as educators, and you have educators that had no technology or very little technology necessarily at their fingertips a few years ago, and now technology is a huge portion of what we do every day, and people are still learning how to use it and the best ways to use that technology, and going through all of those growing pains, understanding that students haven't been in school full time for the last 2 years, and that their stamina for being in school full time is not what it was 2 years ago. It's very difficult. They're tired. It's hard to come to school that many hours a day and go through all that learning and all of this social interaction and things that they have not had as much of the last couple of years. So it's really difficult for them. And it's also difficult for us seeing all of the stresses on the students and the behaviors that we might not have seen previously and trying to cope with all of those things. It's not easy. We still love our students. We love our job. We love being teachers. We wouldn't have gone into this for any other reason, but this is probably the most difficult experience we've ever had. And whether you're a first-year teacher or you someone who's been in the classroom for 30 years, this year is really, really tough. And that grace and that understanding that this is really hard and we're all just doing our best is appreciated.
Jennifer, I know in our previous conversation, you wanted to make sure that we did talk about the successes. And I know that I could sit with each of you for an hour and talk about all the different innovative ways that people in your field have figured out how to educate or even educate better because of the pandemic. But one thing that you had stressed was collaboration. And I do think that there's been a lot of relying on each other in whatever walk of life you're in to kind of get through this. But what ways do you think that in your region that you all have learned to collaborate better or work in ways that are better that stem from your experience during COVID-19 and the pandemic?
Thank you, Jenny. I think the first thing I have to state is, and I think I've communicated, is the teamwork, collaboration, relationships. I'm a county superintendent. I'm here to support schools, all schools, many other schools that we provide service to in Northeast Ohio. The number one piece here, I think, and the takeaway is the closeness it's brought and consistencies with communications to our communities. I also go back to the vision and the mission of United Way. I've been a board member for 4 years. I'm proud to be that in Geauga. But how this community has come together to support one another has been amazing. From the level of our county commissioners, our health commissioners were on. I organized superintendent meetings with treasurers weekly, sometimes twice weekly, when we were organizing vaccination clinics. Our educational service center led that charge with our health departments and organized all the vaccination clinics, and that was a huge piece from last year. And just to have our teachers and come up to us and thank us for having the vaccination, it was so emotional and amazing to watch how excited they were. Teachers coming up to us, and I have to thank our HR director for helping coordinate most of that with our health departments. But our relationships with the commissioners, with the community leaders, has just, I think we now have each other's contacts, but we are on speed dial literally with each other, not just about the pandemic anymore. And I think I've shared that. I really want to focus on the positive, where we're headed. How do we go in that recovery mode? How do we support students, our teachers, our families? I think the also thing I have to mention is us feeding students. We run a nutrition consultant department, and I can't not mention the amount of food that we put for students and families summertime when we were remote and feeding children, and very grateful for the federal government offering that support so we could offer meals free of charge to families. But when I really want to talk about collaboration, it's really about the people. My colleagues as school leaders, I could not be more grateful for the community of Lake and Geauga to work with these folks, learn from them, and to come out of this, which we're, know that there's got to be an end here sometime soon. We all hope, but having those relationships are so valuable, and I couldn't have done this in support the last few years without everyone around us.
I just want to remind our attendees, our listeners, viewers, that we'd love to hear your questions. So you can text them. That number, it's on the chat screen. It's right there. 216-307-5632. 216-307-5632. We'd love to hear from you and get your questions answered. So Thea, I wanted to ask you, I mean, when we talk about early childhood development, and there's so much research evidence that, the earlier you get these kids learning about social interactions and engaging with adults and the fundamentals to learning, how, crucial it is for the rest of their lives. And I'm wondering, do you think that our little ones, our toddlers, and the ones who didn't go to daycare or didn't go to, pre-K last year because parents were worried about COVID, do you think that they are majorly behind their peers who kind of went through that time pre-pandemic?
I think, pardon me, and thank you, Jenny, for that question. I think in the long run, children are very resilient, believe it or not, little ones. I think if we can get our hands on them, we will go beyond where we are now. I agree with you. It was Jennifer, speaking about the community, just collaborations and being able to get children into, if they need special help, get them into services for that, but also and just supports for our families. But I think, Jenny, in the long run, our children are resilient, like I said, and the best, I would think that if you can get them in a good five-star center, I think you will be okay. Make sure that, I constantly tell people, read to your children, irregardless to if your eyes will not stay open. Read to your children, speak with them, not at them, speak with them. Little ones are a lot smarter than you think. and they're watching you. So whatever we're doing the right thing. The children who have come back to us are doing very well. And that was very interesting when we started looking at some of the scores. And I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that they actually scored higher than we expected them to on just, average testing. But the thing that we are very concerned with is the social emotional growth of our children. But that can be turned around. I have hope that, and this is nationally, no, this is a world issue. I'm optimistic that if we get them in timely manners, they'll come to Eric and everyone else in good stead.
Andrea, I know that you deal with a lot of young who are living with, rather than parents, guardians, grandparents, uncles and aunts. How has this experience been for them? And what do they need in support of their efforts? Because I know that for anyone who's taking care of a kid, the pandemic has been lonely, concerning, frustrating, scary, all the things. I mean, we've never appreciated teachers more. But I wonder for those two that maybe we're thrown into a situation of needing to care for and essentially lead the way for a child. How has it been for them? And how does the community support them?
So for the next step clients, and that's a great question, Jenny, a lot of our young adults do live with their family members, boyfriends, girlfriends, significant others. And one of the things that I am most proud of in Geauga, and it's been said already, how collaborative we are. And I'm sure that's true of other counties as well, but I think when Jennifer spoke about that, she could not be more correct. We have amazing agencies, even though we're a small county, that we can rely on to provide services. So if we need help with housing, with clothing, with food, with applications to Medicaid or any other supportive services, we all work really well together. If someone is struggling with domestic violence or any other kind of abuse, we can make sure they are referred to our mental health facilities. So collaboration and education for us in Geauga for young adults is crucial and easily achievable. And again, I don't know how it is in other counties, but I know that we're truly blessed in Geauga to have those relationships. And that includes, United Way and Leadership Geauga and some of the other organizations, Catholic charities that have those resources available. For younger children that we work with at Chagrin Falls Park Community Center, that's a completely different situation in terms of their caregivers. A lot of our families, children are being raised by grandparents. So it's been a very difficult time for grandparents who are more vulnerable. And so we've wrapped them with services. The school district has as well to make sure that the kids are getting to school, or we're providing a remote learning platform as we did last year, so that their elderly family members are protected and are not overwhelmed, and that no one is really isolated. You can imagine how difficult it is for a 75-year-old grandmother, an 80-year-old grandmother raising a kindergartner during a pandemic. So we've done everything we can, providing our after-school programming, making sure they have food, they have tutoring services. We work collaboratively with the Kenston School District to make sure that their emotional well-being and their social skills are up to par.
We have 5 minutes until we start answering some of the questions submitted by the community and the people attending the panel. Eric, I want to ask you, I know that a lot of focus was put on, and I was one of the journalists asking you about learning loss. And sometimes You seemed a little frustrated by the question, but I think there was this big effort and focus on what did we lose academically last year? Let's quantify it and let's figure out in kind of a nice package and a bow, what the students lost and how we're going to make up for it. It seems like because the lines are blurred and this year also looks really different. Do you think there is less emphasis on that and more of a recognition that we've got to do the best we can as a field, as educators, and then start really critiquing how students are doing? Or do you think there is still a lot of emphasis on, make sure that these students are at grade level and aren't slipping behind generationally, because that is important too. So I wonder where you stand on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of the overarching question of what we just discussed, and it's all about the adult approach, right? So we didn't lose learning. It didn't go anywhere. Kids are still learning. They're still able to learn. We lost learning time, and there is a lot of unfinished learning. And so thinking about the approach really matters, because if we approach it from lost learning, we start treating children like they're broken. And we start using deficit responses like saying, you're supposed to be at this grade level, so we're going to teach you at this grade level, even though you're not. And then the student doesn't build on any of their assets. They stay stuck in a frustration space. And that's what's ultimately going to stop a student progressing, whether it be the littlest kids that Thea is working with, or the older students that Andrea is working with, or anywhere in between. But if we instead say, what is the unfinished learning? Where do we start that activates what I already know and able to do? We can actually accelerate and catch kids up. And so it's really about whether we think the systems that we operate are so perfected that it must be the kid that's broken, or whether we think that the student has the ability to grow, catch up, and therefore we have to adapt the system. And we have to remind ourselves that the reason that something's called a third grade standard is because adults like us decided that, so developmentally, learning is actually a lot more organic and fluid, and I think we have to activate a lot of that. What we know now, and Thea alluded to it, is that what we anticipated, which was all kids were kind of way behind, turned out to be a much wider spectrum. So some students that are very, very far behind where we would hope they would be, other students that actually lost very little in remote, and that it's, there are not really easily predictable patterns even in grade bands. So such a wide set of experiences, and that's going to require us to respond differently than if we could say, oh, all of the 3 and 4 year olds missed preschool and we have to just start at preschool. So for me, it's really about a philosophy and approach. My aspiration and hope is in Cleveland, we've really embraced this notion of finishing unfinished learning, really getting students in very complex tasks that are enriching and really activate their learning. My concern is that at state and federal levels, the systems look very much like they did pre-pandemic. New report card, but measuring the same things. And those all are based on the case that people should be in predictable places at the exact same time. And that's just not a smart reality coming out or being in a pandemic.
Well, I was going to ask Jennifer that same question, but it looks like we might be ready for some community questions. So I'll pass that to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One question here is, a lot is being said and demanded regarding teachers right now. What's in place or being considered that helps alleviate some of the stress and burnout of these challenging situations?
Shari, I think that's going to you.
So just overall, one of the things that we've been emphasizing, talking about people's mental health, are the different resources that we have available. In our district, we have not only an excellent healthcare program in place where our members have access to mental health services through our insurance, but we also have a employee assistance program And our national American Federation of Teachers has programs available as well. Some of the crises that our staff have are really truly mental health issues that require some intervention by a professional, not just the self-care pieces that we often hear. You know, meditation will make it all go away. We've heard some of that kind of thing. So we've been really encouraging our folks to reach out for help if they need help, because this is extremely stressful. Also, it is about trying to get our folks time to do some of those things that they can't do when they're with students. It's been extremely challenging because we haven't had substitutes in place. We haven't had the normal times that we would have. We've had the benefit of some very, sometimes I believe that the good Lord gave us snow for a reason, that gave us a couple of days that we weren't expecting, that were very helpful, quite honestly, in kind of recharging everyone's batteries. Snow days, I swear teachers love snow days way more than kids do. Don't let anyone tell you differently, but that's helpful. And what we're seeing is that we do need some time. And so that's one of the things that Eric and I work together on a regular basis to try to find ways to give folks time to do the things that they need to do when they're not with children. Being with the children, we really enjoy that part, but like I said earlier, there's a lot of other things that go with it. And that is the stuff that takes the additional time that really continues to add the stress. So trying to take things off people's plates. We've had varying degrees of success around that.
Alicia, I'd love to turn that question to Jennifer and just kind of get a sense, when we talk about retention and the mental health of teachers and staff, and, so many conversations about, what kind of long-term outlook do we have when it comes to getting people to become teachers, and seeing this as a valuable and fulfilling career. What are you doing kind of in your area, when you were talking about the busing shortages and issues with subs, just like with everywhere. I mean, are there moves that you see being made that are smart ones, kind of in the effort of getting happy teachers, happy staff, paid well and wanting to stay in this line of work?
First, I'll start with it's an extremely competitive market right now. I think all of us are analyzing salary schedules and what we need to be doing, and how we're going to manage that over the next couple of years, because the job market has become so competitive, and the recruitment of our staff, inclusive to teachers, school aides, bus drivers, are going to other positions that are higher paid, and some of that's in the private sector and other business world. So we're really working hard, and I work locally with our colleges and universities at alternative programming, and our curriculum team does as well, to see what we can do for incentive programs and looking at grant funds. We were fortunate. I do a lot of work in Columbus, and in the legislative world, and on many state committees. But in that work, working with our legislators is extremely important. And we were fortunate enough to have a bill passed most recently to allow for substitutes that do not have a four-year degree. So we were actually tapping some of our classroom aides and others of non-degree to be able to provide them a substitute license, and then provide them incentives to go into the teaching world, because some of these folks have been with us and been in classrooms and have had that shadowing and modeling from great teachers, and we need to tap them. We need to bring them into the next, leveling of the future. I think I have concerns though with the numbers that are being reported from the colleges and universities of how many students have not gone back in junior and senior year, probably because of the job market being so competitive, and they're going directly into the workforce. So those are some challenges we're going to have to work through. But I think my role and responsibility is working with our legislative body and our local legislators to help in what we need to support in this shortage of teachers and subs, in addition to see what we can do to be creative with the universities at creating programs to really bring in folks and grant dollars to be able to provide for education so they can go into the education world.
Yeah. Alicia, do you have another question?
Yes, how can community organizations support the schools, caregivers, children, and teachers during this time?
Thea, you want to answer that?
For one thing, you can call me. You can call me and we can give you a laundry list of ways to support young children. Right now, we're just trying to make sure that our children are exposed to all of the wonderful things that young children can be and could be exposed to before they become students in the public centers. We have a partnership with Cleveland Police, where they come in and read to our children. Fortunately, Head Start is not. We don't have a problem with dollars right now, so that's not our problem right now. Head Start really has stepped up and made sure that we had the finances that we needed to make sure that our programs kept going. The community could come in and make sure that we have the supports for our children when they need medical care. We actually purchased a van that will take any parent and child to a medical appointment. We found that was a barrier during the pandemic. So we made sure that we had funds that we could, and we actually purchased the van for that. We are looking at all kinds of, we don't need, we can't have people, traipsing in and out of our centers because of, our little ones can't be vaccinated, that at this point. So we have to make sure that they're safe. But the community can call, and we can give you a laundry list of what you can do for us.
Well, let me ask you this, Thea. I mean, what can be done to support parents? I mean, so much of what I hear, I spent some time with a Say Yes family support specialist at Erica Lewis Agassiz. Story ran on that today. And, we're hearing that these mental health referrals are top when it comes to what essentially their social workers are seeing at CMSD schools. And, a lot of the stress and anxiety these kids are feeling are because of what's happening at home. The pandemic's causing economic strife, parents losing out on jobs, cutting back hours, they have to balance, do I take this job or do I stay home and watch my 2-year-old? So I wonder, are there ways in which we can recognize the parent and the family and know that so much of the child's well-being and feeling like they can go to school and do well is if family looks good at home? Are there ways that we can broadly think of supportive measures for them?
Very good question. Some of the things that we're doing is we had believe it or not, we had a Zoom parent wellness seminar. And I can't tell you how many parents came on that seminar, and they stayed the entire day because they were just trying to find an outlet of what can we do. We have a father's initiative that continues to go. And we have fathers, I can't tell you how many people show up to these things because they're looking for just a way to talk things out, to make sure that they're doing the right things. And I always say, I've never met a parent that said, I'm going to be the worst parent I want to be, can be. They want to do right by these children. They want to do right by their families. So I think our community can step up as far as when we're talking the mental health issues. They can step in and say, well, I can handle this part of their, of what they need for mental health. I can take this on. We have, for our staff, and I'll go back to our teachers as well, our early childhood teachers, especially, all teachers, God bless you. I was a teacher for many years. I know how tough it is, and it has to be tougher in this pandemic. What I would love to see is, how do we thank heroes that aren't being recognized as heroes? Because our teachers are heroes. Our parents who are hanging in there with us, they're heroes. And I think a simple thank you to our staff it would go a long way. And for us, we actually gave our teachers, we're just like everyone else. We lost a lot of teachers with the Great Resignation. But what we've done is made sure that the ones who stuck with us, we gave them monetary incentives. And believe it or not, that goes a long way. But a lunch here, or just a common saying thank you would help our teachers.
Alicia?
Yeah, what new teaching methods used during COVID will continue post-pandemic? I know we're thinking a little out of the box here, but it is a futuristic question.
Yeah. Eric has an answer.
Yeah, I would say one thing that really came out of our experience is that we are now a one-to-one device district, meaning every student has a tablet, a Chromebook, a laptop, and we're outfitting our educators as well. And one of the things that our educators did that I think wasn't as strategic as I would like to explain it now, but turned out to be really useful, is that we kept the online learning platform alive and asked teachers to put all of the student homework in that portal to build the habit of, you take your device home, you log on, you go in your portal, you do your homework. And so when we had to flip classrooms, or when we had a week where we just couldn't staff because of Omicron, everybody was kind of prepared for pulling out their devices. And then when we had the last 2 snow days, we went remote. Our kids were in class and they had their devices. And I don't think that's going away. I was in a middle school classroom at Memorial School. And these are students that pre-pandemic didn't have devices. This was December or maybe November, so they haven't had these very long. They all had their devices on their desk. The students were doing presentations, and so they were literally dropping the PowerPoint that they made for their presentation into the teacher's cloud folder. Then they were going up to the front of the room and touching the touch screen, pulling it up out of the teacher's folder and turning around and presenting. And we would not have had that in our experience, this anytime, anywhere opportunity. So I'm really certain that's one of the things that we'll take away. We've also really been trying to leverage this as an opportunity to get more into really problem and project oriented learning. And our students and our teachers have done some really exciting things. We launched it last summer. We're really working it. And we think we're going to stay that course too, that if you can do these rigorous tasks, you can pass those tests. And you'll have an ambition to learn the skill you need for that test. So I think that's there. And then to the whole child and whole family, that you mentioned our Say Yes family support specialists. We do have to attend to the whole child and their family, the social, emotional, cultural, and physical wellness. And fortunately, we do have those social workers that are blocking and tackling and helping our kids have the things that they need with this United Way. We have access to this United Way's 211 database to get quick responses to those disruptors that families have. And finally, to the question of, what community agencies can do is we need those out of school time activities. And we've had a lot of partnerships across our community. We need volunteer groups to be in schools with our educators, helping with traffic control in hallways, or, helping monitor, free time so that kids can experience the richness of school. So there's lots of really just practical ways that people can participate. And I think lots of those things are going to be with us as the new normal in a really positive and healthy way.
Just feeding off of that question and Eric's response, Jennifer, I know that, lately when I've driven by a school and I see a practice going on, a sports practice or whatever, I can't tell you kind of just that feeling of joy it gives me. It feels normal. I remember when I was on sports teams and just that great feeling that you have participating in whatever activity. Kind of through that lens, I mean, what things do you think have really benefited that whole of the students when it comes to their emotional, mental well-being? Have there been any programs that you've all instituted that you think are really like helping these students kind of get to that sense of normalcy or feeling good about where they are and where they're going?
Yeah, so I'll thank you, Jenny. I would definitely like to tag along on what something Eric had commented on, and it's really about programming. So we opened a family resource center in one of our school buildings for the entire community. We did summer tutoring and themed programming for students in families. And I'm kind of going to add into the question that was before about what resources are we giving families. And I'm really proud of that center. It's accessed by our entire Lake County. We're duplicating that for Geauga County as well. But we also, positions are really important. I have to touch on this. We've really learned about the essential positions in education we need. And one of those that we have is a family engagement liaison. And that individual really has connected our schools and families and community with resources that are needed for them to move forward. But also, when we really talk about programming, it is about the before and after school. It's about that extended programming. We're really focused right now. We have an pretty extensive, literally extended learning plan to support both Lake and Geauga counties with some resources we have received. And we're very excited. I think we needed this at this point because our takeaways, Jenny, really are, what have we learned? We can all say our skills in technology, especially our students, have been enhanced. But I also have to state that I believe our parents are more engaged because they've been at home with their kids, helping to educate them. Mm-hmm. And that's been we can't lose sight of the parent piece here. And really what they did during this time frame, and it hasn't really been discussed yet, but it's been in the back of my mind, because we really believe, and my staff has commented on this, is that our families were there, a lot of them watching and learning some of the content specific to courses, and really, relearning with their own children, which was a great experience. And how do we catapult that into the future and have them more engaged now as we go forward? But I really think our takeaways are what are some of the programs and services we have really utilized that have gotten us through this time, but that have been success. And we've watched that with our students and the impact it has had. So we're going to move it forward and be positive, and really excited about our extended learning opportunities for our families and community in both Lake and Geauga.
Great. Thea, I'm so sorry I didn't see your hand was up, but please tell us what you had to say.
That's okay. We have family service workers that work directly with our parents and our families. I always say they walk on water, because they engage with our parents and making sure that they have everything they absolutely need. If they need a job, if they need food, whatever they need, these family service workers are there to help them. We also have coordinators that coordinate any kind of factions that the family service workers may need, and make sure that they have the tools to help our families. I agree with with Eric, and I agree with you, Jenny. It's wonderful to see children beyond COVID. What we're doing is one of the things I know is good for children is all children is to get them outside of the classroom. So we are in the process of building what we call outdoor classrooms, where children can engage in learning not only inside of a classroom, but outside in any given weather, as long as it's 32 degrees and up. So it's something that I believe that is something that's going to stay with us, and it's a good thing. Our young children, yes, they had more screen time than we even thought we would have, but it's working very well for them and the families. Some of the families use we gave our families tablets as well. They were looking for jobs with the tablet. Good. It was a good thing because they needed that support. And we gave them that support and it was fine. And we made sure that they had connectivity. That was a big thing too. So I think as we move forward, those are the things that we're going to hold on to because those were lessons learned.
Andrea, do you think that the young adults that you're working with, do you think there has been any sort of, with the kind of being remote and everyone turning to Zoom, do you think there's been any advantages? Because again, it just seems like such a daunting time period to be a young adult during all of this and trying to figure out what your path is. I mean, has there been any kind of positives that have come out of this, or are there ways in which you think that the community can be supporting these young people when they're trying to figure out, I don't know, apartments in college or jobs?
Right. Well, I think our young adults are very savvy when it comes to using their devices, the internet, sometimes in negative ways, but many times in positive ways. You know, they're applying for jobs on the over the internet. They're looking for colleges. They're doing all those kinds of things using their devices very successfully. We're in the process of filing taxes right now through the United Way, myfreetaxes.com. So there are so many positive opportunities when it comes to using technology. However, there's so much importance that should be put on face-to-face kinds of conversation, how to relate to people directly, feeling a comfort level with speaking with someone appropriately. So we work a lot on that, and that's something we rely on other agencies and business owners, individuals to help our young adults to just know what's appropriate, what's not appropriate in the workplace, in school, if they're going on to college. There are so many opportunities, but they have learned a lot of those skills online. So it's kind of a combination. I'm not sure that has a lot to do with COVID, just
Sure.
because they had those skills previously.
Sure. Just a quick anecdote. I recently interviewed several college freshmen for a story that I'm doing, including a couple of Say Yes scholars. The overarching theme with all of these three kids wasn't about the impact of the pandemic academically on them, or if they were having a hard time transitioning to college. They all were worried about making friends. And they were all super happy to be in college, taking the classes that they want to be, but they had all made friends. And there was something so just normal about that. And I don't know, it warmed my heart and it made me feel like, okay, we're all going to be okay, I think. In the long run. Alicia, do you have another question?
Yeah, I'm going to just give it how I got it, was just a little bit of a context, and then the question up here is, I work at a local shelter. There have been many students recently who missed months of school, up to 1 whole year of school upon intake. Is there no longer follow-up on kids with extreme absences? I am concerned about the many kids falling through the cracks due to the pandemic.
Okay, well, I think Eric, the district certainly has experienced chronic absenteeism, and how have you kind of navigated that or try to figure out a way to gauge the ones that are really struggling?
Yeah, so first of all, there's a lot of efforts to find those kids that kind of vanished during the pandemic. The Cleveland Teachers Union and the district partnered up, got a grant and partnered up and actually did phone calling, door knocking, home visits, trying to find our students and get them back. And we know there are some out there that we have not found. So I just want to acknowledge that. I would really urge people who know of kids that are not where they need to be to reach out to that district, whether it's my district or another. So because that is a kid that we don't know where they are, that somebody does. And then we can work to get them back into school. We kind of have a two-pronged problem. One is those kids that have truly stopped out and we haven't been able to find them. The other is the very different attendance patterns we're seeing now in the pandemic than anything we ever experienced pre-pandemic. Caused by the mental and physical stress that kids are in, the fact that kids are working or babysitting and taking care of siblings, the fact that they're afraid to go to school because they're worried they're going to get sick, and those kinds of things, and that the structure of school is really rigid compared to what they just experienced. So we have a two-pronged problem that we've got to tackle. And I know we're kind of out of time here, but just know that your local schools are trying, and so please reach out to them if you know where a kid is that we haven't found.
It seems like we're close to running out of time, but I would ask Andrea, I mean, how has your organization worked on making sure that young adults, kids aren't falling through the cracks?
Because we're very attentive to all of that. Everyone, we're very concerned. We have several students still in high school, seniors generally if they're 18. As a retired teacher, I'm very focused on education and making certain that they do get their diplomas or their GED if that is necessary. So the person who did ask that question as a shelter worker, I think it's essential that they follow up with the district wherever that young adult came from. They follow up with that district, confirm that there's a transcript, what classes might be necessary, really encourage them to complete their education if they possibly can. I mean, there's so much support in the district. Really, there are homeless liaisons in every district. And the law requires that transportation be provided. It's always, I'm a proponent of in-person education, if at all possible. So getting them there, accommodating their needs if they're not able to go to school every single day, maybe adjusting their schedule. But I think it's terribly important, like Eric said, that none of those kids fall through the cracks. That if we're able to provide them with those educational supports, we do that.
Thanks so much, Andrea. That's a great way to end the conversation. Thank you guys so much for your really thoughtful answers and for informing us all about the realities of what's been going on at your schools and districts and organizations. So thank you so much. Augie, I'll send it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And thank you for your moderating this evening's discussion. Really was very stimulating and appreciate your time. I want to also say a special thank you to Alicia Ellis for curating and facilitating the Q&A from the community. Well done, and appreciate again your commitment to this, Alicia. Thank you. One other point I want to make is Jennifer Felker referenced the fact that she serves on the United Way of Greater Cleveland board, and we're proud to have her representing our sister organization in Geauga County and part of the United Way of Greater Cleveland family. I'd also like to point out that Shari Obrenski is also a member of our board and of course represents the Teachers Union, and Eric Gordon is on our board as well as president and CEO of the CMSD. So thank the three of you, not only for your leadership in your profession and your work, but also for your leadership on our board. And thanks to our many community partners for their support in bringing this important conversation to life. It wouldn't have happened without them. And so we also want to thank, for sure, Ideastream Public Media, City Club of Cleveland, WOVU 95.9, and WOIO Channel 19, who live streamed tonight's conversation. And last but certainly not least, we thank our panelists and audience members for joining us on our mission to encourage engagement and dialogue, as well as advance understanding of this important topic. Our next panel discussion will be held on March 31st, focusing on limiting critical race theory and the effects on education, nonprofit organization, and governmental systems. Our Ohio legislators have introduced bills aimed at banning the teaching of critical race theory and diverse concepts focused on nationality, color, ethnicity, race, or sex within primary, secondary, and higher education, state agencies, and political subdivisions. Our March 31st conversation will bring together panelists representing a variety of groups throughout Northeast Ohio to discuss the potential implications of these bills within their own organizations and the communities they serve, and the intended impact of these bills in the education and nonprofit sectors. Please join us by registering through our website at unitedwaycleveland.org. Click on our events link and it will take you to the registration page. Registration is complimentary, of course, and open to all. Thank you again for being with us tonight, and have a good evening.